Okay, so I'm looking at the participant list here, and it looks like we have Louis on the line. I'll go ahead and get started. We're going to do a brief introduction on the Includes Center, and then turn it over to Louis for his remarks. So I want to do a brief introduction for everybody. My name is Andrew Crum, and I am working with the SRI component of our center, which is a collaboration between SRI and the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, running at what we're referring to as the Include Center, which we're posing and framing as a network improvement community for Include's NSF projects. A brief introduction about our center and our work. You can find the website at http://includecenter.org. And the goal of this, of our center in particular, is to provide and host 5 webinars on 5 specific topics related to improvement and the work that's involved in identifying high-leverage practices and problems, using data to improve, conducting and supporting formative evaluation within an Includes project, and then communicating within a network or within a collective impact study, and then communicating externally with clients, funders, and partners. So these are the 5 topics that we'll be addressing through our webinar series, and then we're going to post information again on the Include Center website right there on the top of this slide related to a face-to-face gathering that we're going to host here in California at the Carnegie Foundation on these topics, and an opportunity to network and engage in some joint work here in California. So more information and more details to follow on the face-to-face meeting. But up to this point, we've been able to, we had our first webinar with Jen Russell and Tim Podkuhl on networked improvement communities. And I am pleased to turn it over to Luis Gomez, who will talk to us today about identifying high leverage problems, which can help anchor and orient improvement work within a network. So I'm going to launch Louis's slides here and then turn it over to him. So Louis, whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. Hello, hi, I'm Luis Gomez. I am a professor at UCLA in the Graduate School of Education and Information Studies, and a senior fellow at the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. You can go to the next slide, please, Andrew.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay, great. Thanks. So what I hope is we'll talk for about 20 minutes or so, and hopefully then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A after that. So we use this term high leverage problems. You know, simply put, I mean, high leverage problems are problems that matter, in the sense that we can work on problems that have isolated places in systems, and if we get them right and we make a lot of progress, they aren't terribly generative in that they don't, making that progress doesn't then lead to progress in other places. Whereas the things that we like to refer to as high leverage problems are, if we make progress on these, lots of other things come along with them. And so today, I mean, toward the end of my remarks, I'm going to sort of talk about a way we can begin to think about seeing which problems are high leverage and perhaps which ones are not. But first, let me say that I think that the failure to converge around a common problem is the most important reason why aspiring networks fail. That oftentimes people get themselves going and really don't understand why they're doing the work they're doing, or have varying definitions of what the problem is they're working on. And coming to a problem that really matters is probably the most difficult thing that an aspiring network has to work on. And coming to a problem that matters really means identifying work processes. And the work of improvement is all about the work of improving processes of work. And all work, if you want to improve work, has to be identified in a process. And improving quality is done by studying process and identifying processes, and not merely by inspecting the products of processes. Paul Batalden, who's a noted medical educator, said every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. So the task of coming up with a high leverage problem is seeing the system that creates the problem that we're trying to work on and trying to understand where in the system we'd like to place our efforts. And so the first thing to think about, though, in this regard is that all problems, as simple as this may sound, all problems are not created equal, and we have to understand the sorts of problems that, A, we want to work on, and when you think about bringing improvement methodologies to the fore, what sorts of problems are especially suited for the work involved in taking up an improvement effort, because it is the case that improvement efforts require a huge amount of improvement efforts are a heavy lift. And given that they're a heavy lift, we ought to be working on problems that are really well suited to the effort that they entail. Can I have the next slide, please? One way to think about that, the problems that are well suited to improvement efforts, is to think about what Nelson and Stolerman referred to as tame and wicked problems versus wicked problems. Tame problems are problems that you can see the end from the beginning. Wicked problems are unique situations whose resolutions involve iterative refinement, so you can see the next step, but not necessarily all the way to the end. Tame problems are problems where there are well-known algorithms to get them done. Wicked problems have no known algorithms. They're easy agreement on the definition of a problem, of a tame problem, whereas complex problems with multiple causes and many satisfactory paths define wicked problems. And once fixed, a tame problem tends to stay fixed, but once fixed, changes in organization, changes in the individuals or the conditions of work can take a problem that was once stable and make it unstable again. I mean, one way to think about this is that you can think about painting a room as a relatively tame problem in that the methods of doing this work are well known. Sometimes applying them can be really, really complicated with many steps, but if you follow the steps, you'll get the results you intend. And sometimes applying those steps requires a fair amount of creativity and problem solving, but the end is known at the beginning, whereas sort of complex problems like improving math or science achievement in a school district or even in a single classroom may not have and often do not have this sort of regularity about them, this easy definition about them. So the work that we want to take up in using improvement methodology is really aimed not so much at tame problems, but at wicked problems. And the idea here is that it's not that tame problems necessarily are easy, it's just that they're regular. And wicked problems derive their difficulty from their irregularity and their sort of iterative nature. Next slide, please. So in the realm of wicked problems, Einstein once said, if I only had an hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. And often in the work that we've done and in the work of taking up the work of networked improvement communities, we spend time in exactly the reverse way. We spend way more time pounding on solutions and far too little time working to understand the problem that confronts us. That's the next slide. And it's not, we've called in the past this tendency to go towards solutionitis. And I believe that it's a human tendency to want to jump to solution too quickly. I believe that in all sorts of problem domains, we have incomplete analysis of the problem that we consider, less than a complete assessment of problem-solving alternatives. We have this tendency, I believe, to want to see complex matters as simpler than they are, and it leads us to take up what you might want to call low-powered solution approaches. So what are kind of low-powered solution approaches? And then the next slide, please. Well, one is mandates. You set targets, create incentives, you create data dashboards, and you hold individuals accountable. Another, in the next slide.
The sale, and you can get the car, and you're all happy, okay.
Is to ask for more resources of one sort or another. We often assume will get us to the solution that we desire. More staff, more money, more technology. We often assume that I don't know what the right answer is, but someone somewhere does, but I don't necessarily know how to find them. So we hope somehow that they will come around and they will help me solve the problem. And finally, we just throw up our hands and hope that the problem itself goes away.
Okay.
So, said with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but oftentimes we fail to see. We jump to solutionitis and we sort of take up these very low-powered solutions strategies that aren't necessarily going to help us make progress on wicked problems. Can we have the next slide? And why do these low-powered solutions emerge? I mean, for really good reasons, especially when you think about education and schooling. Well, one is what Martin Luther King referred to as the fierce urgency of now. The problems we confront are so profound and affect so many people, we want to get on with it. And so we are constantly confronted with the fierce urgency of now, and sometimes the urgency of the problems that face us don't allow us to take the space necessary to understand the problems and understand the problems in enough detail to come up with solutions that might gain traction. So we sort of we start fast and fail slowly. The illusion, we often have, especially in leadership, we have the illusion that we absolutely know what's right and ignore what is well known and charge ahead. We often don't have enough, don't recognize we have not enough technical know-how to solve a problem. We don't understand the most complicated problems we face, or what one might refer to as multi-perspective problems. And so we see problems from our narrow perspective and develop a kind of siloed reasoning and don't understand the multiple causes that underlie problems that we'd like to fix. And connected to that, you see pieces and not systems. And most of the problems that confront education today in particular are system problems, and we need tools and techniques to see the systems that underlie the problems that we seek to work on. Next slide. So seeing systems. I mean, seeing systems has, at least in our judgment, three important parts. One is that you need to understand the lay of the land. You need to have some sort of sets of flaring exercises that allow you to brainstorm multiple aspects of the problem. You need, when you come upon things that you think will provide traction, you need focusing techniques to see them in detail. And constantly, the task of making progress needs to be vetted and re-vetted against locals, people who really understand the problem and have a felt need around the problem. One way to do this is to engage in the flaring exercise. One way to engage in flaring exercises is to engage in what we refer to and others refer to as causal systems analysis. And causal systems analysis, one, is a way to get a lot of ideas on the table. So it's a kind of classic brainstorming activity. Some people refer to the product of these causal systems analyses as sort of fishbone diagrams, and other people refer to them as Ishikawa diagrams. But what they are a way to visualize the multiple causes that some problem has underneath it. So if you take here an example that a problem that vexes lots of school districts is the high number of special ed referrals. And oftentimes this problem is especially visited upon disadvantaged children. So many school districts around the country have feel the problem of high number of special ed referrals. So one can, this is a fictitious causal systems analysis in that it was constructed by my colleague Marissa Lozano and I. But you can imagine one where the big bones of this causal systems analysis, people might come to understand that the problem has these kind of big categories of there's some set of issues embedded in classroom support, some set of issues embedded in school-level support, in parent connections, in leadership, district policy and practices, and student motivation and engagement. And so you might ask yourself, if you're engaged in such a process, well, why does that happen? So if you advance the animation a bit here, you might, in the classroom support level, you might say, well, one reason that we see things like this is that in classrooms, we privilege product over process. And when we do, certain kinds of ways of learning might become less visible, and therefore people who engage in those ways of learning might be viewed as less appropriate to the learning situation. So if you advance again, or you might say, well, there's a misalignment between what goes on in classroom, misalignment between classroom level supports and school level expectations, or there are not enough tools available to provide support for teachers and others to collect data, or there are not enough supports for professionals to collect data, outside professionals to collect data that they then share with classroom teachers. And these might conspire then to have teachers and others to suggest that students be referred. If you push the button again, so teachers might not communicate with parents regularly enough, and then all of a sudden, parents may see that teachers are now suggesting that students be referred, and this might be viewed as something that comes out of the blue rather than the process of continuous communication over time. And if you push the button again, so another way to see this kind of problem is that leadership sort of views their role in this as complying with the rules rather than having lots of opportunities to observe in classrooms. And finally, there's a huge variability in the guidelines that determine whether or not students should be referred to special education. Now, people who see these particular elements of the fishbone that we highlighted here might, if you know the process, might say, well, these are all things that are critically related to the student, to the student referral process. And they might see inside of this all various and sundry elements of that process that would say, well, maybe I should look more carefully at the student referral process itself. Can I have the next slide? And so in doing so, each of those examples might find a place in a process like this. And when you have a process like this, so this is the student success team process, and it's the product of the student success team in many school districts that then cause students to be referred. And so when you ask yourself, what are the work processes and organizational processes involved in the referral process? And when you see a map like this, one of the things that you're looking for are places of leverage in the map, such that if I work on that part of the process, I might have a meaningful impact on many stages in the process. So if you push the button, a place like developing and implement classroom-based support is an opportunity to reflect at a midpoint in many elements of the process. And similarly, if you push the button again, here, these are opportunities for teachers to reflect on various aspects of the work that they do that then lead to students' referrals. And finally, actually one more push. These are various places in the system that might be high leverage in that if you work on them with traction, if you get traction in these places, you then might get other parts of the system to fall in line as a function of your work at these kind of pinch points. The idea would be, in work like this, is to take your causal systems analysis that we showed in the last slide and the system map in this slide, and not only to developing these as kind of community property. As you develop them, you share them with locals and people who really understand the processes and see if these things have a kind of reality for them, that is for locals. And if they do, then with things like the system map, it might give you some indication about how to create a concrete problem that we can agree upon, that we'll work on, and gives you some confidence that the problem has a certain amount of leverage in the system. Go to the next slide, please. So we use this language of problems, but problems really are, the word problem is really a proxy for several things. It's a proxy for issues that concern us. It's a proxy for problems themselves, and it's often a proxy for the thing that we seek to change. And while that's okay, we need to understand that embedded in the language of problem, there's a deeper language that tells us where in the process of unfolding a thing to work on we are. So often, we're just at the level, a team is just at the level of an issue. Sort of deficit views of students' ability to learn. Or they sort of dig just a little bit deeper, that teachers' beliefs about the needs of highly specialized learning support and the task in the act of referring students to special ed. So, and you could, once you come to agreement about that as an issue, you might then come to deeper agreement about a specific thing that we want to work on, decreasing by 90% the number of SST referrals in some month. The actions here, right, you want to engage in a set of actions that help you understand the system that's giving rise to the issue and problem you care about, and then you want to pick some high leverage point inside that system to then begin to drill down deeply. And what work like this does for you as a team seeking to generate a network, on the one hand, it allows you to develop a kind of common language of the thing that you're working on, the problem area, and it gives a common view of where in a system the team is working. And so it allows the team to focus sharply, use the same language, and sort of make progress being guided by a common view of the complex of things that gives rise to the problem that they're working on. Next slide, please. So, by way of conclusion, right? Understand the problem and see the system means uncovering the system that's causing an outcome and not simply trying to develop a generalized theoretical framework. It means understanding users' felt needs and rather than simply trying everyone's solution. It means identifying breakdowns in the system rather than identifying the good and bad, good people as good apples and bad apples who are causing some system to fail. And investigating the existing system rather than believing you're starting from a blank slate. So as Paul Batalvin said, there is some system at work that's causing the problem that we see, and part of our task as problem solvers is to begin to see that system and find places in that system where we can intervene that's likely to lead to traction. So that's the, I think, the end of my, let's see, next slide. I think there's no other slide after this one. That's the end of my prepared remarks, and there's time for Q&A.
Thank you, Louis. So again, for those who joined a little bit later, my name is Andy Crum. I'm moderating on the SRI side for Louis and his remarks. And so a couple of ground rules here. If you had trouble logging in either on the audio or in the WebEx, you should know that we are recording this, and we will post this to the website for everyone to look at a later date. And if you're still having troubles with audio, but you're able to view and are in the WebEx, please feel free to use the chat function to chat any questions that you might have, as well as feel free to email me at andrew.crum@sri.com. It's that email address there is in the chat as well. So a couple of different ways to get your questions to us, and I can help give voice to those for the recording and then for everyone else. So feel free to use email or chat. And at this point, we will turn it over for questions from everybody. So Louis, maybe to get the ball rolling, one of the questions I had as you were going through your remarks, when we think about defining the problem and both thinking about it as an issue and as an aim statement, who in your mind and who, based on your experience, are the right people to have in the room to engage in that work? And does it stop there? And what's the process for something like a problem statement to have a life beyond that initial meeting?
Well, I think you need representatives, people who represent the elements of the system that you want to have impact on. And the people then should have within their sort of span of control the ability to address the problem as you're defining it. But having representatives as part of your kind of network initiation still requires that you need to visit the products of your analysis with a broader representation of those people who sort of feel and understand the problem. So it's sort of, you need to have diverse representation at the table to do work like this. But it's not sufficient to only have that. You also have to find techniques, and there are techniques, to capture the opinion of local actors and to help guide you as analysts and your team as analysts to which of the ways of casting the problem has the most traction for the community in which you seek to work. So it doesn't end with the team doing work like this. That is only the beginning.
Do you have thoughts or recommendations on how something like a fishbone diagram can live beyond that meeting? Are there things either from the hospital context or meaning the medical context or schools or in the CCP in which you've worked where you've seen these be living documents that have purchase for more than those folks who were in the room?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They often well into a process, you begin to see that the way you have defined a problem is not quite right. And we talk about these tasks of doing a fishbone diagram and doing a system map or building, for those of you who read about this work, building a driver diagram as kind of linear processes. You go from one to the other to the other. But really they're cyclic processes and engaged. So building a system map, for example, could encourage you to say that I really got the fishbone diagram wrong, or you could be well down the process into testing and you could say we probably ought to go back and take a look at the anatomy of the problem that we're trying to solve. So we talk about these things often as though they are linear, but they are a cycle that wraps around itself, and revisiting it and revisiting various elements of it is critically important to making progress. And teams often think about these as linear, and they have to give themselves license to go back and to restate, because we often, I often think about progress as, you know, going down some linear pipeline. But work like this, you have to accept that a huge amount of progress comes in the process of going back and revisiting.
So I want to give a little bit of space for anyone who has questions either on Lewis's remarks or anything that's come to mind as you've heard some of his responses to questions. Again, feel free to chat them, email me, or unmute your line and jump in. Lewis, I know one question that has come up as we've been talking to PIs kind of informally has been, how easy is it to engage in some of this work? So we've heard people have gone to the website or they've read yours and Tony's book, and there's a way in which doing improvement can both feel easy and simple at one and the same time. And so a more precise form of my question then is, how useful is it to have somebody in the room who's done it before to help you put together a fishbone diagram, to do a driver diagram, for example? And is that a nice to have, or have you found that to be a must-have, that you have kind of a more knowledgeable other on the improvement realm working with you?
Well, I mean, I think that the book that we wrote and other sorts of things like it are not, our book is not a how-to book. Mm-hmm. having read the book, for example, does not mean, in our judgment, that you know how to do work like this. It's very helpful to have someone in the room who's done it, but it's also possible, I think, to learn how to do this work if you have a commitment to actually doing the work. And by that I mean you can't just simply read what we and other people have written and assume you know how, but sort of drilling down and taking up, in some cases, a small problem and trying out these techniques, some of them, will stand you in good stead for using them on problems that are actually high leverage problems. So, for example, one of the things that we have done at the foundation is create a small curriculum for doing what's called personal improvement projects, things that you might want to do, like figuring out a way to increase the amount of exercise you do every day, and committing that problem to this discipline allows you to see how the parts interact in a way that you could never see by simply reading our book or some other thing, or in a way that won't allow you to be overwhelmed by sort of starting out just with some big, hairy, high leverage problem that's affecting your organization. So finding small ways to start, like the Personal Improvement Project curriculum, is a way to build expertise in an organization where you might not have someone who already has this expertise to serve as your guide along the way. I think it's better to have someone who has expertise to serve as a guide along the way, but it's not absolutely necessary. As long as you take up the problem, as long as you take up the task of learning in bite-sized pieces.
So we have a question through email. Louis, is the Personal Improvement Project curriculum shareable in any way?
Yeah, actually, I think it's on it is, and I believe it's on the Foundation's website. But if it's not on the Foundation's website, feel free to send me email, and I will send you the materials for the curriculum.
Excellent. And one last question from me, Louis, and it has come again through conversations with folks, has been, so we wrote a proposal, we have a project in place. How do we think about this research agenda that we put into effect along the lines of either adding improvement, blending improvement, thinking about the improvement science plus a research project that's already in either planned or in the works. So I don't think there's like a precise answer so much as what are your thoughts and perhaps advice for folks as they think about integrating insights, tools, and routines from improvement projects into something that may be more or less a traditional research project, if that's a fair framing.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, as you're saying, there's not a straightforward answer to that question. I mean, on the one hand, I mean, I think unto itself, improvement is a form of research. Having said that, I think that many projects of the collective impact variety that grow out of more traditional sort of research architectures have in them what you might call places of design and implementation. And I think at those places of design and implementation, you have an opportunity to bring tools like this to bear on the creation of and generation of the sort of interventions and the sort of the interventions that you'd like to share beyond some small group of people to a larger community, you have the opportunity to use tools like this that help you to ensure that that process goes well and is generative inside the community. So I think that many collective impact projects have these places of design and implementation, even if they're embedded in sort of more sort of traditional experimental research, where these techniques can have a very big role. But I want to emphasize that I think these techniques in and of themselves represent a valid form of research.
So I want to respect everyone's time and maybe some technical maneuverings. If there is or there are any more questions, we'll have another minute or so for you either to chat that, email, or unmute your line and ask Louis directly. While we're waiting on that, I will go ahead and express my thanks, Louis, for your time and your remarks and the good progress that you helped those on the phone and those who will watch this recording make become a little bit more familiar with some of the tools and approaches to framing problems, issues, and aims. And when combined with what Jen was talking about in our previous webinar and what will follow in our discussions on data evaluation and communication, the important ways in which these tools can be used to support researchers working with one another in either in a network setting, a collaborative, or collective impact setting. So thank you very much for your time and for your thoughtful remarks.
And thank you, and I appreciate those people who chose to take their time to join and listen. I really do appreciate that.
Excellent. So with that, I will I'll go ahead and end the webinar for now. Please tune in on the Include's website for more information on upcoming webinars. Our next one will be on using data to improve. And as I mentioned, if you had issues, and we do apologize for some of the technical stuff at the outset, we will have a recording posted to the website so you can get caught up on the early discussion that took place in some of Louis's earlier remarks. So thanks again, and hope to see you at other Include Center webinars, and then more information to come on our face-to-face gathering in the spring. So thanks again.